What if I told you that the FIA had to publish official data on Lewis Hamilton's car in the middle of the second week of testing in Bahrain? Not because it was illegal, but because he was being too good. Because that is exactly what happened in Sakhir. While many thought that Ferrari was simply hiding cards, the Federation decided to publicly intervene to clarify that the SF26 complied with the regulations, even if it was pushing every technical limit to the extreme. And the most shocking thing was not the inspection. It was the internal reaction. Vasseur did not expect that the actual performance that Hamilton was extracting from the car would be so high on long runs. What happened in that second week was not a simple test. It was a silent statement. Ferrari showed efficiency on the straight, stability in corners and hybrid management that left uncomfortable questions in the paddock. The FIA responded with technical transparency, and the rest of the teams began to look askance. Are we seeing the birth of a dominant Ferrari, or the start of a political war before the Bahrain Grand Prix begins? The second week of testing in Bahrain began as a logical continuation of the initial work, but quickly changed tone. It was no longer just about racking up the miles or trying out basic setups. Ferrari arrived at that second round with a much more defined plan, with the SF26 fine-tuned in very specific areas that had left interesting signs in the first week. The goal was not to hide, but not to reveal all the cards either. However, what happened on the track ended up speaking louder than expected. From the first long runs, something different began to be perceived. Hamilton's car not only showed speed in a punctual lap, it maintained a constant pace in extensive simulations, with controlled degradation and a power delivery that did not drop in the last few meters of the straight. That consistency was what sparked the first conversations in the paddock. In a scenario where most teams were still struggling to find stable operating windows, the Ferrari seemed to operate with an unusual technical clarity for this stage of the year. The focus began to focus on two areas: the behavior of the new soil and the management of the hybrid system. Analysis indicated that the SF26 was achieving particularly high aerodynamic efficiency without sacrificing slow cornering stability. That, under the current regulations, is extremely difficult. Normally, when a car gains top speed, it loses support in technical areas. But in Bahrain, during that second week, the Ferrari seemed to balance both naturally. That's when the narrative took a turn. The FIA decided to publish additional metrics on the car's dynamic behavior and parameters related to energy deployment. It was not a sanction. It was not a formal warning. It was a clarification. A movement that only occurs when the internal noise is loud enough to demand public transparency. The Federation certified that the car met regulatory tolerances, especially in sensitive areas such as structural flexibility and the use of electrical energy, but the simple fact of having to explain it raised political tension. Within Ferrari, the impact was different. According to what is said in the technical environment, the real shock did not come from the FIA, but from the comparative data themselves. Hamilton was extracting more performance from the package than projected in the simulator. In long runs, especially at the end of the stints, the Briton maintained a pace that exceeded internal expectations. It wasn't just the car. It was the way it was being conducted and managed. That combination between machine and pilot began to outline something deeper, an early symbiosis that many did not expect so soon. Meanwhile, in the pit lane, the looks multiplied. Rival engineers observing the rear of the Ferrari after each relevant stint. Technical delegates carrying out more detailed visual inspections than usual. All within the normal procedure, but with an obvious symbolic load. When a car excels in testing, it automatically becomes the center of scrutiny. And in this second week in Bahrain, the number 44 was under the microscope. The important thing is to understand that there was no declared illegality. The FIA was clear in its communication. The SF26 is within the regulations. But it was also clear that Ferrari is exploring extremely tight areas of interpretation. And that is the essence of modern Formula One. It is not whoever avoids the limit who wins, but whoever understands it best. This first act does not speak of confirmed controversy. Talk about latent tension. Of a car that forced the Federation to explain why it was legal. From a team that discovered that its real potential was greater than calculated. And from a paddock that, even before the Bahrain Grand Prix begins, already feels that something is moving in the balance of forces. The publication of data by the Federation was not coincidental. It was a specific expansion on dynamic parameters and energy management to make it clear that the Ferrari met the regulatory tolerances. But in modern Formula One, public transparency almost always responds to prior internal pressure. And that pressure came from the paddock. Rival teams began to wonder how it was possible for the car to maintain electrical deployment in areas where others were already limited by power delivery. This is where the situation becomes more interesting. We're not just talking about power. We are talking about efficiency. The Ferrari didn't seem to have any more power, seemed to use it better. In the long simulations of that second week, the pattern was clear. Less drop in performance at the end of the straight, greater stability and quick changes of direction, and a more predictable degradation in the last third of the stint. That combination does not arise by chance. It is the product of an integrated design between aerodynamics, rear suspension, and hybrid management maps. And in the midst of that scenario, Hamilton's role was decisive. Because it is one thing for the car to have potential, and quite another for someone to be able to activate it on the track. The internal data that surprised Ferrari was not only absolute times, but consistency sector by sector in the long run. Hamilton was managing to maintain more stable tire temperatures while exploiting straight-line efficiency. This reduced global energy stress and made it possible to better manage electrical deployment in critical phases. That's the kind of detail that doesn't make headlines but changes championships. Meanwhile, the atmosphere in the pit lane was tense. Technical inspections after the strongest stints found no irregularities, but sent a clear message: Ferrari is under observation. And when a car is observed so early in the year, the psychological component multiplies. Because although the FIA certified legality, the simple fact of needing public clarification installs the narrative that it is being played to the limit. This is where the Vasseur element comes in. The shock was not due to fear of sanction. It was by performance dimension. Internally, the team expected competitiveness, but not such an obvious advantage in certain simulation scenarios. That alters planning. If you discover that your package is stronger than projected, you must decide whether to continue developing that aggressive line or protect it strategically before the first Grand Prix. And that decision is not trivial because any premature update can reveal too much. What happened in that second week in Bahrain was, in essence, a dress rehearsal with real consequences. Ferrari showed a powerful card before the official debut. The FIA responded by ensuring that everything was within the regulations. Rivals began to adjust internal narratives. And Hamilton, far from being in the adaptation phase, began to show that he understands exactly how to extract the essence of this car. Ferrari now faces a delicate decision: continue pushing this aggressive concept from the first race or manage its technical advantage so as not to provoke an early regulatory reaction. Because when a car forces the FIA to issue public clarifications so early in the year, it means that the level of observation will be permanent. And that changes the internal dynamics of the championship. Rivals cannot protest what is legal, but they can apply political pressure. They may question interpretations in technical meetings. They can ask for clarifying directives. They can try to close these gray areas in future updates to the technical regulations. And that is where the real battle begins. Not on the track, but in the closed rooms where it is decided how far a rule can be interpreted. What the second week in Bahrain left is an uncomfortable feeling for the rest. Ferrari has not only built a fast car, it has built a car that seems to have better understood the philosophy of the current regulations. And when that happens, the reaction is usually twofold. First surprise, then counterattack. Vasseur's shock then is not fear. It is consciousness. Awareness that they have something strong on their hands. Awareness that potential is real. And also awareness that they will now be under the permanent microscope of the FIA and rival teams. The third act closes with a clear image. The second week in Bahrain did not define a scandal, it defined a narrative. The narrative of an aggressive but legal Ferrari. From a Hamilton that begins to synchronize with the machine ahead of schedule. And from an FIA that, by publishing metrics to calm the noise, indirectly confirmed that something about that car was generating too much impact to ignore. The season has not yet officially started on the track, but the technical war is already underway. First, internal pressure on rivals. Because now they know that it is not enough to match raw performance. They must understand how Ferrari is exploiting the regulations. Second, permanent surveillance. The FIA has already put the focus. Each future evolution of the SF26 will be analyzed with a magnifying glass. The second week in Bahrain was just a test, in theory. In practice, it was the prologue to a technical battle that may define the 2025 season. Ferrari has shown that it does not need to cross the line to dominate the conversation. It is enough for him to walk exactly on it. The question now is not whether the car is legal. That was already clear. The question is, can others catch up before this aggressive interpretation of the regulations becomes the new benchmark for the championship? Let me know in the comments what you think about all this.